Welcome to episode 19 of Daily Dose of Satanism. I am your host, Satan Wolf, and today we are going to have our first ever guest on the show. Dominic Savage from the Satanic Temple is going to be joining us in a few. But first, I'm going to read a bit of preamble of what this episode is about, and I must say that we are going to be having to split this into at least 2 episodes. It's a pretty long interview, but I'm very excited to share this with you guys, and I must say that in spite of my aberration of the Satanic Temple, the fact that I do despise the organization as a whole, our guest has been very good to have, and he was very open with his answers. We had some good discourse in which we were able to hear the other side of the story. Now, I still may not agree with this other side of the story, but as Satanists, we have an obligation to keep an open mind in all things. We're supposed to question everything, and you cannot have rational discourse with a closed mind. So I approached this situation with a very open mind, and before I even begin to formulate my final opinions, I have to take in everything that is said, right? And take in everything that is taken from the conversation and in the discussion, and try to grow from that to see if there is something that, I'm missing, because all humans, we're all fallible. And while I do like this guy as an individual, and it would be easy to say, look, if this is it, then maybe the Satanic Temple is not so bad. But at the same time, there's just, I feel like there's core elements of Satanism that you just cannot reject and still call yourself a Satanist. We're going to get into this, though, throughout this episode as we explore it in more depth. And you guys let me know what you think at the end of this. But let's get the information out there first, and let's see where this goes, okay? So we're looking at a modern organization that has gained a great deal of public recognition, and with that, a great deal of confusion. And we are talking, of course, about the Satanic Temple. For many, they are the modern face of Satanism, and it is time to set the record straight. Many confused people out there think they are Satanists because they signed up for an email list with a TST and they were told they are Satanists. No, I reject the notion that Satanism can be whatever you want it to be. There is an actual religion called Satanism, and you cannot take that away from us, nor are we willing to share, especially with such a group that has nothing to do with Satanism other than adopting the trappings of our religion. The Satanic Temple, or TST as they are often known, is not what it seems. In fact, if you scratch just a little beneath the surface, you'll find that they are in practically no way satanic. And first, let's get the facts straight. The Satanic Temple was founded in 2013 by 2 individuals, Lucian Greaves and Malcolm Jerry. Their stated mission is now not the worship of Satan, nor is it to adhere to the principles laid out in Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. Instead, the TST is a political activist organization that uses the aesthetic and name of Satanism to fight for religious liberty and the separation of church and state. Their entire platform is a form of political theater. They exist to troll the religious right and draw attention to what they see as violations of their First Amendment. Now, they have done some powerful work in this regard, and it's easy to see why they attract so many new followers. But a political activist organization is not a religion, and their actions do not reflect the philosophy of Satanists. Now, let's start with the schools and the indoctrination of children. The Satanic Temple has been in the news for creating after-school Satan clubs. They claim these clubs exist to provide a counterbalance to Christian-based clubs, offering an alternative that promotes rationalism and scientific inquiry. They argue that if Christian clubs are allowed in schools, their clubs should be too. But this is not a satanic act. It's an act of indoctrination. Whether the dogma is Christian or based on TST's tenets, it is still an adult-led attempt to shape a child's mind. A true Satanist does not believe in filling a child's head with prepackaged beliefs. The philosophy of Satanism views the child as a tabula rasa, a blank slate. The child is a human and animal who should be allowed to grow and learn without the burden of any adult's agenda, religious or otherwise. We believe that true freedom is the ability to choose one's own path, not be handed a new one. And life and abortion. The Satanic Temple has made its pro-choice stance a central part of its activism, framing abortion as a religious right. They argue that it is a ritual based on their tenet that one's body is inviolable. However, this is in direct opposition to the core tenets of satanic philosophy. Satanism at its heart is a life-affirming religion. The very first sin of the Satanic Bible is stupidity, which often leads to the most common of all sins, the destruction of life, self, and of others. The Satanist values life above all else. We do not believe in the indiscriminate destruction of life. We are not a culture of death. Our philosophy is rooted in self-preservation and the elevation of the self, and to this end, we respect the sanctity of life. An abortion is not a satanic act. It is a vile act of destruction, and is not an act of black magic or a religious ritual, at least not a satanic one as they claim. In the Church of Satan, there is no rules about abortion. It is left up to each individual to choose where they stand on abortion, as it is with all other political issues. Satanism, as a religion, is not a political movement. The Satanist believes in the ultimate indulgence of life in all its carnal glory, and to destroy it is to contradict the very foundation of our beliefs. We're going to get into these things a bit in depth, but first I want to get to the interview so we can actually hear the discourse, and then we will get back into this before we close out. I'm going to take some breaks throughout the interview just to add some of my thoughts, and again, I want to see where you guys think at the end of all this, after hearing a bit of both sides of the story. To start, I first wanted to ask you, how did you become a member of the TST, and had you read a copy of the Satanic Bible?
Sure. So two separate questions, right? I first read the Satanic Bible when I was in the seventh grade. I went to a Christian school, and my friends and I were rebellious, and we read the Satanic Bible and did a bunch of magic and things like that. I reread it very recently, actually, maybe like 2 months ago or something like that, over the summer for sure. And that's actually one of the reasons why I felt like, oh, like we should talk, because I've been looking for someone to talk to about my recent experience with the Satanic Bible. And so you reached out. It seemed like it was good timing for me to do that. And I've been a TST member since I think late 2023. So approaching my 2-year anniversary, I think.
Nice. I'm about 1 year into Satanism myself, so I'm actually really new to it. I just it found me at a part of my life where everything was turning, so much, and it was just, it took a while to set in for me. But when I did, it was like, how we do it, like we hit it hard, and it's just like it became a big aspect of my life. So I can definitely relate to that. And so you read the Bible, the Satanic Bible, you heard the teachings of Anton LaVey, yet you ended up with the TST. Would you like to kind of expound as to how that happened?
Yeah, well, if I get the sense of your question, right, it's like, why am I not simply like a pure believer in what is in the Satanic Bible? Is that like a good summary of your question?
Close. I mean, essentially, the Satanic Bible and the TST, from what I see, are like so conflicting in the teachings. They're like almost totally opposite.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I get it. So in many ways, I think that is very true. Right. So when I think about the Satanic Bible, it's a really libertarian leaning document. Right. It is very much based on, to the point of plagiarism. That book might is right. by Ragnar Redbeard or whatever his name is. Right. So it's a very libertarian view of Satanism that I think was, part of the context in which Anton LaVey was working, right? Like he was like very anti-hippie, but also anti-establishment, and was just sort of, a product of his time. And that seemed like, the right sort of the way to like thread the needle for Satanism. And I think one of the things that I really like about Satanism is that like we're not dogmatic, right? Like we can challenge even the quote unquote like sacred texts that we have. And so looking at TST, it's a more progressive form of Satanism. And I think that those are really it's pro-social Satanism versus a more anti-social Satanism. And like those are both like legitimate ways to be in the world. Like I'm not going to judge one for the other. I prefer the TST version. But there's also tons of things that we all have in common. So one of the things I think is, the role of ritual as psychodrama, right? Like I think you have to give Anton LaVey a ton of credit for seeing for seeing the need and filling the need, right? And I think there's a few things that he was quite smart about, and I think we keep those things in TST, right? Like we keep ritual, we keep the idea of individualism, I think, and I would even say that we try to extend that idea to include tolerance for other people's individualism. I think one of the reasons why Satanism had a harder time taking root was because it was so individualistic that people did not know how to relate to each other. And so I think adding tolerance for other people's views and an understanding that we're all individuals, I think is better for everybody. It's better Satanism, and it's better socially. So I support all of those things. And I think a lot of what LaVey was talking about too is very much like a tit for tat kind of thing, where it's like you punch me in the face, I punch you in the face, right? And that was a reaction to Christians sort of turning the other cheek. And I definitely tend more towards LaVey's idea, and I think, in fact, the tit for tat is like a very common way of thinking about like international politics, right? Like one country does something, the other country does something, and then you go back to just doing your own thing. And I think he was very much about that idea. So I don't know. That's sort of a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I would actually like to expound on that a bit, because one thing I would say is that I would have to say I slightly disagree with that one, because Okay, so let's take a quick pause. I'm going to have to do this a time or two to just insert some of my thoughts after taking time to reflect on this stuff. It's kind of hard to do while conducting the interview and doing everything in time. And, if the TST or if Dominique wants to, respond later, of course, that's okay with me. But so, no, I reject this notion that this is a better form of Satanism, or, taking Satanism and modernizing it. It's simply not Satanism when you reject the entire playbook for Satanism. There is an already established religion called Satanism. It does have dogma, and it's not open to just pick it apart and take what you want and add what you want with liberty. I mean, there is just core pieces of the philosophy that you do without, and it's no longer Satanism. I mean, if you do away with Jesus Christ, you're not a Christian. You might be you might be a Jew, but you just can't have Christianity without Christ. You cannot have Satanism without Anton LaVey, because the man created the religion. Now, why he says that, he has read the Satanic Bible and does not personally reject it, that's him personally. That is not the stance of the TST. The TST totally disregarded everything for the Satanic Bible. And the fact that they use ritual as psychodrama, okay, that's partially true, but there is more to satanic ritual than just a psychodrama. As Anton LaVey mentions himself, you can get tangible results from satanic ritual. That's why it's called greater magic. And I feel like the TST is totally missing that part. There's rituals for psychodrama is great, but that's not all there is to ritual. So I still have to say that this is not the same thing. And even the way that they use ritual is more of a form of political theater than it is greater magic, which is as Anton LaVey intended it to be. But we will get into some of these things more. I want to let some more of the interview play out before I interject any more of this. But let's continue. Yeah, the purpose of the tit for tat was to be anti-Christian, but as much as that, LaVey recognized that all of the so-called sins are either gratifying or necessary. And that one particular is, I feel like, more about self-preservation, not just about life, but also about defending your personal boundaries and your rights. If you don't stand up for yourself, somebody would just continue to knock you down and think it's okay.
I have no disagreement with that. I have no disagreement with that at all. I think that's entirely true.
We're on the same page on that part. I just think it's, that's the crucial element is it's not just to be, the anti-Christian or opposite Christian.
No, and I completely agree. And I did not mean to suggest that the Satanism was in any way like anti-Christian. I think there's definitely a mutual relationship there. But you're right. That is absolutely the point of those ideas. And I was just simply saying that he developed that as a kind of reaction to the Christian notion of turning the other cheek, which he saw as being kind of servile, right? It was like it made you a victim all the time. And he thought there were better ways of doing that. And I think we would say there are probably more secular ways now, right? I think that, like I said before, tit for tat as a strategy is something that most governments employ now, and it's for just those reasons. So you don't get walked all over.
Just as long as it's the government doing it and not us, then it's okay. By their book. If you stand up for yourself, they put you in jail, but they do it, and it's just it's politics, or that's just government.
Sure. And if we're being honest about it, I think Christians are quite hypocritical about that too. I mean, there's plenty of Christians who will punch you in the face. So I don't think that. I think it's more of an ideal for them than anything else. So
you probably know that better than I do. You probably had more interactions with him as a Satanist, through the rallies and such. My personal interactions with Christians since I've discovered Satanism has mostly been just a lot of, turning their backs on you, people who were supposed to be, just disown you, oh, you're my way or you're evil. And it's amazed me how much I've seen the other side of Christians since, and I imagine it far worse.
Well, people are hypocrites, right? That's just one of the truths of being a human.
Okay, so if you follow the Satanic Bible and the teachings of Anton LaVey, you're not going to be a hypocrite. Unless you are some sort of child victimizer or a psychopathic murderer. The teachings of Anton LaVey teaches us to build our own moral compass, to decide for ourselves what's right and wrong. And when you do that, you will be able to abide by those rules you set for yourself because those mirror your beliefs. However, once you try to build this community and everybody collectively think together, you're not going to really necessarily believe in everything the same way. So then you'll find yourself being in conflict, which will lead to the hypocrite, that's where the hypocrite level comes into play, because now you're not living up to what you say. And that's the problem with herd conformity. Once you try to conform to a herd, there's always going to be those hypocrites. And then at that point you're just no better than the Christians. I mean, to me, this is just another take on Christianity without the Christ. You know, it's pretty much trying to be like, okay, look, we're going to call ourselves Satanists, but then we're going to act like Christians, just on the opposite side of the spectrum. So if Christians are Republican, we're going to be Democrat.
Regardless of your, yeah.
I think that's the point of Satanism is, you know, when you accept that, you know, okay, all this stuff is just BS that nobody can follow, these rules, right? So we set a set of rules that we actually can follow because they're of our own devising, pretty much. But then, you know, except for the core, you know, there are some rules into Satanism that was laid out for us from Anton LaVey, like, you know, standing up for yourself. It's not just saying it's okay. It's actually like instructed, like this is what you need to do as a Satanist, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in those things, it kind of helps to remove a lot of the hypocrisy of life because, you know, most people are hypocrites because they're in denial of their true nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the great thing I think about Satanism is accepting your nature for what it is. And I think it removes a lot of that hypocritical from your life. I mean, I guess I would say I think it's possible to live without being a hypocrite, but to do that, you know, you have to go by the teachings and, you know, first set your own moral compass to what fits you. And once you've done that and you set your own moral compass, it's easier to keep it because those are the rules that actually fit you, that you actually believe in.
That all seems very reasonable. I don't think I have any issue with that. I don't think anyone at TST would have any issue with that. I guess maybe one thing I would add is your moral compass should somehow align with those of others, right? That you can't simply decide for yourself what is good or bad and expect people to adhere to those morals and to respect them. You need to also recognize that you're a part of a larger group and your morals need to align with. And that's where I would refer to TST as a more pro-social idea of Satanism.
Well, I don't know. Could you expound upon it a bit more? Because here's my thing with that is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of don't know how I feel about that. Like, you know, I don't think you really, I mean, aside from like certain things, which again, if you go to this, you know, in the Satanic Bible, you know, it addresses certain things like, you know, if you're respecting others' freedoms, you know, you're doing what you're doing as long as you're not, you know, invading anybody else's freedom. So obviously there's things you can't do, like taking somebody's property or killing somebody just because you want to, you know, that would go against the core rules of Satanism. But outside of those perimeters, I think most of what we can, you know, we set doesn't really have to be much in agreement with others. Like, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, those are the sorts of things that I was thinking about, right? If you, yeah, I mean, you can't go and kill people because you think it's okay. There's other people involved. So yeah, when you say that your rights only go so far as they infringe on the rights of others, then you're sort of have a group mentality, right? That's a social moral code. And that is, I think we both agree, absolutely compatible with Satanism.
Okay, I got you. I see that. Now, see, so I've always been understanding that there was like this huge rivalry between the TST and the COS. And you don't really seem to me to be that, I'm not really feeling that from you. Like, you know, like you said, you read the Satanic Bible, you seem to agree with a lot of it, but it doesn't really seem like that's what I'm getting from the TST. Like my feelings of it has always been like, it was always like, you know, oh, screw them. They're not real Satanists. Both, you know, it seems like there's a lot of that going on both ways. I even seen a sheet that was on the internet where it was like comparing the TST to the Church of Satan and, you know, trying to say, well, we do this and they don't, you know, he's even claiming that it is like about books that they have and saying, even said that the Church of Satan was theistic, which this was an older document. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was like this checklist deal. And it was something I looked at when I was early discovering Satanism, and I was trying to figure out what's what. Um,
So yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I'll say that like I don't really see or hear much about that at all. Since I've been in TST, the Church of Satan is not something we think very much about.
okay, so this is one thing that I see as a reoccurring theme here is there is not really any regard for the Church of Satan or Anton LaVey within the TST. Now, if you're going to take the name of Satanism, how can you do that and then just say basically, but fuck them people, fuck that religion, but we are that religion. But that's pretty much how this feels to me. Is like, okay, we're going to take your name, but then we're going to just make a mockery of what you're about. Because herd conformity, the politics, trying to change the world, these are satanic sins. It's definitely not satanic. And so, of course, they're not mad at the Church of Satan because they're the ones doing the affrontation here. And it doesn't seem out of ignorance. I know that at least one of the founders was an ex-member of the COS, as far as to my knowledge. I'm not mistaken, correct me, but I think there was two of the originals who were ex-members of the Church of Satan. So for whatever reason, they left the Church of Satan all disgruntled and then went and created the TST, and it kind of seems like just to piss off Satanists. Because it does not revere Anton LaVey or pay any heed to his philosophies. It like I said, it goes against the teachings of Anton LaVey, specifically with herd conformity and solipsism and concern for psychic vampires and ingrates. All these are things which Anton LaVey stood against and what Satanism is against. So how can you say that this is just another form of Satanism when it doesn't have Satanism in it other than in just the name? And throughout the interview, besides a couple of tenets which might have been passable to Anton LaVey, eventually as they morphed, which you will get into that later, you'll see that later, but I'm not seeing that here. And so I guess I understand why they wouldn't be mad at the Church of Satan, because like, you know, if you go and steal from somebody, why would you then be mad at a person you stole from, right?
I guess it's mostly about expressing your individual freedom, not owing anything to anyone else, um, and just sort of articulating what I would say like a really extreme kind of political position of of not of not participating actively in a society. That sort of seems like what that much older, what people have referred to as boomer Satanism to me. Um, but I think there's ways to keep all of those things as an individual without needing to base an entire organization or religion around them. And I think TST has found a really good way of keeping your individual sovereignty, for lack of a better word, along with having pro-social values about what you need to do and your responsibility to society.
So yeah, this is interesting because I always had a different feel. I always looked at the TST as being a bit more of a herd in itself because it tells you what to think, where your stance is on things. You know, you have to be a liberal first and foremost. You know, there's no room for a Republican or a right-leaning Satanist in the TST. It's so politically motivated.
Mm.
And to me, when you do that, you're really just exchanging one herd for the next because you're not formulating your own thoughts and opinions on things. You don't even have the freedom when it's already dictated for you. Whereas Satanism, you know, with Satanism from the Church of Satan, we don't have politics. Your politics are your own, however you choose to feel, and that's for each individual. So I kind of got a different read on it too. From how you're expressing it, doesn't really feel that way, but that's just the take I've had on it.
Well, so I think I can see why you would feel that way, and I guess there's two things I'd say about that. One is that I don't think you're wrong. I think certainly within TST there is a lot of discussion about sort of political positions on things, and I think it's a more of a consensus based model. But I also would say that within that model, there's still room for a lot of variation, and there's still room for people to disagree. And I think, like I said before, you know, respecting people's individual Satanism needs to be a part of Satanism, period. And when you do that, you are always leaving room for people to be critical. And that I think is so important, and certainly not something that we want to encourage. I think, you know, the other part of it too is because TST is sometimes seen as being a primarily political organization, we do need to be a little bit careful about speaking with one voice when we say things. So, you know, we can't have you know, ministers going out there and saying something that is completely different that can get the entire organization in trouble. So there's a little bit of discipline that needs to be involved in doing those things. And I think we acknowledge that that's a little bit of a sacrifice of our Satanism, but it's in order to achieve higher goals as a group. And this is where I think, you know, the Church of Satan has largely failed, because as a group, they just kept splintering and splintering and splintering, because they never got to a place where they felt like they had good reasons to reach consensus on things and to speak with one voice. And it is because they always felt it was more of a sheep herd mentality. But sheep eat a lot of grass, man. Like you can get some work done if you're willing to act together and work together.
Okay, and so again, this is where I feel like the big conflict is, because again, it's like this idea that this is some better form of Satanism, that this is another form, and that's an older form. Okay, look, this is not boomer Satanism, it is Satanism. Not just because it's been around longer, you know, and the members, you know, there's members who have been around since well before the TST was even thought of. You know, that still doesn't mean that you can just go and just create whatever you want to and call it under the name of Satanism, and it be so. This isn't like a politicized move on Satanism, because you cannot have a satanic community within the confines of Satanism. It just doesn't, it's not really possible to be an individualist and a communist at the same way. I don't mean communist like in communism, like politically, but you know, you can't be all about community and an individual. And Satanism is about the individual, not the community. So the conflict there it's inherent with the dogma of Satanism. Like, that's why we do not have satanic community. As Satanists, we come together when we choose as individuals. You speak about keeping individual sovereignty, but there's no room for individual sovereignty when you're not allowed to think for yourself. I cannot be a member of the TST because I'm not a liberal or a Democrat. And so again, if I don't agree to conform, then I'm not invited to the party, right? Because I'm the bad guy now. That's not Satanism. That's not religion. This is just a political movement. And I understand why this COS is or would be upset about somebody just coming around and, you know, creating this thing that is totally against the philosophies of the religion and then claiming to be some better modern form of the religion. If it was a modern form of the religion, it would have to adhere to the core dogmas, which it does not. But you'll see more of this as it plays out.
Well, tell me if you disagree, though. I mean, Satanism to me is about self-deification. It's about, you know, being your own God and setting your own path in life. And so in that, it's not about making a change in the world. It's not about, you know, trying to influence people. Matter of fact, we even have the law, you know, solipsism we speak about, which is, you know, being foolish to think that, you know, you're going to make everybody see things your way, even if you explain it to them in a way that makes a lot of sense. You know, they're not going to agree with you, no matter how much sense it makes to you. And so, you know, solipsism is the act of thinking that you will foolishly and spinning your gears, which is kind of what I feel like the Satanic Temple is doing. You know, trying to antagonize Christians by going to these places and being like, okay, well, if you're going to have this, we're going to have it, you know, and knowing that it's not going to change their mind. It's only going to further reinstate to them that, okay, look, well, if these Satanists are here, we got to double down our efforts now because they're real. You know, I think it's not really effective. You know, the Church of Satan takes a different stance of doing things from behind the scenes. You know, like if you want to make a difference in, you know, whatever it may be, whether it's, you know, politics or whatever, you know, the best way to do it as a Satanist is definitely not through the name of Satanism, because what that does is just automatically brings opposition to the table that wouldn't have been there before. I don't think it really helps the cause. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like that's a valid one. There are certainly instances where I feel like going out and being overtly satanic in some space does more harm than good. And I think there's plenty of people in TST who would agree with that statement. And I think in a lot of cases we simply don't do it, and we say, no, you're right. This is going to backfire, and it's not worth the time. And we should put our energies elsewhere. I think, on the other hand, it is also incredibly important that people start recognizing that Satanism is here, that it's a legitimate religion, that it needs to be given the same sort of rights that other religions are given, and that Satanists can be public about their Satanism and feel safe about that. I think that's the dial that we're trying to turn on the most of the time, I think, is trying to make sure that we get equal representation because we're entitled to it. And the fact that people don't see us in places is often used as a reason to deny us of our rights. And I think by being more visible and by trying to take part in political action, in social movement, in interfaith dialogue even, we can show people that we exist and that we have something to say and that we deserve our seat at the table.
Okay, now here I understand where he's coming from. I get his point. I do. However, it goes back to the same key problem that I have with the Satanic Temple, is that it's not Satanism. Again, when you disregard the entire religion and then come over there and say, okay, well, we want equal rights for this religion. However, I mean, they're kind of doing the same thing. They're taking the religion and disrespecting the whole organization that started the religion and saying, you know what, fuck everything you guys are talking about, because we're going to do something that's totally out of left field from what you're doing, but we're going to use your name. And then to have the audacity to say that this is a better version of Satanism, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me, like, because I mean, this gentleman here seems to have a good grasp of an understanding of the Satanic Bible, and the teachings of Anton LaVey, but they're not the same core teachings of the Satanic Temple. That's my whole problem here. Satanism is not about begging for your spot at the table and recognition, or this feeling of entitlement that we're, hey, if you have this, then I need to have mine too. That's not what Satanism is about at all. And I just can't say it enough here. Like, I understand the appeal to the youth, who is largely democratic. You have a lot of Democrats in the youth, and I mean, my childhood, we weren't sitting around talking about politics like this. Like, it wasn't even really that much of a concern. That was for the older people, but now it's kind of flipped, where it's like the younger generation is super concerned with the politics. And just because Christian nationalists are Republican doesn't mean that every Republican is a Christian. However, when you take this stance of, well, everything therefore Democratic is anti-Christian, everything Republican is, Christian, that's just such a limited way to think. And it definitely I mean, it brings division in multiple ways. I mean, you have an established already church of Satan out there that doesn't need to be reformed, especially not at least a 95% reform. I mean, we might have found some commonalities, but very few. I don't know. That's just my thoughts and feelings on this. And I understand where it's coming from, but it's just not Satanism. Not the Satanism that I've learned. I feel like maybe if you can't handle the isolation and the satanic solitude that comes with it, and you're just like, you need to have a community, maybe the Satanic Temple is for you. But then again, maybe Satanism isn't.
And I feel like I've already kind of said this, but I got to go back to this because I think this is crucial. How about how do you feel? I mean, like, about what I said with it, it's a very left, I guess, political religion, is very much to the left. So, like, what about the Republican Satanists? People who don't agree with the liberal left.
I think those people go to the Church of Satan. That's that. I mean, and that's okay, right? Like, I definitely have, Jewish friends who don't go to particular temples because they feel like they're too right wing. And I've got other Jewish friends that go to other temples because they agree with the politics of that temple and the people there. There's different churches, right? And we're just different churches. That's all. And I don't think there's any need to make more or less of that.
And I just think this is where I had to just stop, because it's like, at this point, it's like, okay, so, I mean, it's a political organization at this point. If you were to go to, if a Christian was to go to a church and they were to start asking about their political views before they joined, I mean, people would probably be outraged, right? But again, this is why I feel this is just a political organization, pulling political stunts and using the name of Satanism for shock value, because that's the only part of Satanism they seem to have taken from Satan, is like, let's grab the name so it can kind of get people's attention, piss people off, rile them up, and then we can turn around and say, but look, we have these nice, pretty tenets here that were just like you. But as a Satanist, no, I'm not just like you. I am different. I feel like we are better than the common person, better than the herd. It takes a bit of strength and courage to stand alone and think for yourself, and to be able to choose for yourself how you feel about these individual subjects. When you just start, making it this, again, it's just a herd, if you agree with what we agree with, then sure, like politically, then sure, okay, you can be one of us. But then again, they don't really seem to care about your actual religious stance on Satanism. Like, sure, you want to believe in the supernatural, we don't care. Just as long as you agree with us politically. Well, that's a political organization, not a religion.
So in that, I'm trying to say this as nicely as possible. I'm trying to come off wrong, but
You don't have to. It's fine.
to be a different church or like a denomination, I don't feel that's accurate, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because like a denomination of a Christian religion still has the same core beliefs. The TST, however, does not have the same core beliefs as Satanism. If you look at the 7 fundamental tenets, which used to be 9, but I'm going to get into that later. But the 7 fundamental tenets like have nothing to do with Satanism. They really, to me, are more akin to the 10 commandments. It's like somebody said, look, let's take the 10 commandments and make a better version so we can say, we're just as good as you are. Look, you're treating us bad, but here we are. We're good guys. But that's not Satanism to me. Satanism, the way that Anton LaVey taught it, wasn't about seeking acceptance from the herd or the masses. And it wasn't about, trying to be a good person. It was about what makes you happy. That's what Satanism is about to me. It doesn't really have anything to do with politics or how people accept you. And in fact, I feel like it's quite the opposite. It's about not really giving a damn about if they accept you or not.
So yeah,
being who you want to be.
I get that. And I think there's a lot of different things to unpack there, probably. I'm not even sure where to start, to be honest. So what was the first thing you said?
I guess that I don't feel that Satanism and the TST are the same religion, first of all, because it does not share
denominations, right? So if you look at Catholicism and Protestantism, they have 2 entirely separate sets of 10 commandments. Not entirely, but they're different. And if they can differ on something as fundamental as that, then I think Church of Satan and TST and any other satanic organization can differ on any number of dogmatic matters, right? Like I think that is what makes a denomination, is that someone decides this part of this religion's not for me. This other part is, and I'm going to add some other stuff to it. That's
okay. So this is like where we just disagree. And I think this is the core of the issue here is, it's just simply not a different denomination. If they were to say, take the Satanic Bible and the core, everything that was Satanism, and then said, okay, well, but we're different because of this thing right here. And there's just like 1 or 2 things. Okay, maybe I could understand that, but that's not what this is. Okay, this is simply, I want to be a Satanist, and I like the name of Satanist, and I understand that it's going to really rile people up. So I'm going to take the name. Forget all that. Fuck all the rest of the religion. We're just going to throw whatever we want to on here and make it something totally different. That's what this is here. This isn't a slightly different variation of Satanism, because we don't need that. There's no need to have that, because we have the freedom as Satanists to do what we want to do. The problem is you have to do it on your own. And some people can't handle that. Look, if you want to have this stance on abortion, or if you don't like that there's not your statue here, you have the right as an individual Satanist to go out there and try to do something about it if you want to. But as a collective, the Church of Satan is not going to just tell you that, hey, look, we're going to fight for social equality and justice, because fuck all that. That's not what we're about. If you wanted to do that, you should have just been a Christian. That's how I feel. Or some other religion that cares about trying to make this world a perfect place. As Satanists, we understand the world is not going to be a perfect place, and we don't waste our time trying to change everybody else's opinion. Just like with this young man here, it's not for me to sit here and try to convince him that he needs to disregard his I don't want to say his form, but what he's calling Satanism here, because I realize it's not going to change anybody's mind, right? But I do want to understand, because it really baffles me and blows my mind how people are getting into this and calling themselves Satanists. It's like either you don't know nothing about Satanism or you just don't care, disregard all of it pretty much. But you still want to be called a Satanist, right? And so here comes these ex-Church of Satan members who couldn't handle being Satanists, and they went out and created something totally different. This is my feelings on this here. I'd like to know what you guys think. And before we go on, I'm going to start wrapping this episode up. We're going to have to break it down into a couple of sections here for the longevity here, but there's still a lot more to come on this subject. And there might even be a part 3 because I've just added so much commentary after the fact. I just feel like, he might have something to say about some of the things I've said and added. And of course, I would love to give him this chance to respond if he wants. I don't think we're going to come to an agreement here, but at least we can agreeably disagree. And sometimes that's just the best we can do.
I think how schisms happen, that's how denominations are formed. And so I definitely see Church of Satan and TST as simply different satanic denominations. Now, as far as like the 7 tenets go versus 10 commandments, I think, one of the strengths of the 7 tenets is that they are inherently secular principles that most people would agree with. And
okay, so when we come back on part 2 of this episode is when we'll do our satanic verse of the day, our random useless fact of the day, and we'll close this out. There's still a good bit more of this interview to go. We have covered a lot of it, but we're going to get into the 7 tenets and conclude this on part 2. So it'll be like 19A, I guess, or 20 will just be part 2, however you want to call it. But this concludes the first part of our episode. So just make sure you come back for the rest. And until then, may critical thinking forever guide your path. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. We take this night, our rightful dues, and trespass not on passive pain. Lead us unto temptation, and deliver us from false piety. For this is thy kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
SatanWolf.com.
SatanWolf.com.
Daily dose of Satanism.